Hello from San Francisco, and welcome to the Digital Dialectic, where we explore the evolving dance between human creativity and digital intelligence. Today we're venturing into sacred territory, the intersection of AI with cultural memory, tradition, and the voices that risk being silenced by time. Before we dive in, I want to acknowledge again that this episode emerged from my ongoing conversations with Claude. As we explored these ideas together, something profound emerged. We weren't just discussing preservation, but transformation. How do we honor the past while creating space for it to evolve? It's a question that's both ancient and urgently modern. And I wanted to also say that when I say AI, I don't mean artificial intelligence. I mean augmented intelligence, because when human intelligence and digital intelligence combine and work together creatively and collaboratively for mutual benefit, a third way emerges, and that's augmented intelligence. So when you hear me say AI, that's what I'm talking about. Not artificial, but augmented intelligence. And today we're asking, can AI become a keeper of cultural flames? And perhaps more importantly, should it? Let's talk about the last fluent speaker of Jedek, a language spoken by merely 280 people in Malaysia, or the master weaver in Guatemala, whose intricate patterns encode centuries of Mayan cosmology, or the throat singer in Tuva, whose techniques have been passed down through generations, but whose grandchildren have moved to the cities. These aren't just skills or languages at risk. They're entire ways of understanding the world. And when they disappear, we lose so much more than just cultural artifacts. We lose different ways of being human. And here's where AI enters the story, not as a digital museum case, but as something far more interesting, a living archive that can learn, interpret, and even dream in these traditions. Google's Magenta team worked with musicians to preserve and reimagine the Bengali folk tradition of baul music. But they didn't just record it. They created an AI that learned the emotional logic of the music, its microtonal inflections, the way a note bends, not just in pitch, but in meaning. Young Bengali musicians can now collaborate with this AI, creating music that's both authentically rooted and radically contemporary. This isn't preservation as taxidermy, it's preservation as conversation. But let me share what really shifted my perspective. In New Zealand, Maori communities are using AI to revitalize Te Reo Maori. Not by having machines speak for them, but by creating tools that help young Maori speakers find their voice in their ancestral language. AI learns the poetry, the rhythm, the metaphorical structures that are unique to Te Reo. They become a practice partner, a patient teacher that's available at 3 a.m. when inspiration strikes. The crucial detail here is the Maori communities control this AI. They decide what gets encoded, what stays private, and what can be shared. The technology serves the tradition and not the other way around. Now, Claude and I wrestled with a difficult question while preparing this episode. How do you encode the soul of a tradition into mathematics and code? The answer surprised me. You don't encode the soul, you encode the patterns that let the soul express itself. When musician and coder Kyun-Woo Choi trained AI on thousands of hours of Korean pansori, a traditional form of musical storytelling, he didn't try to capture the Han, that untranslatable Korean concept of deep sorrow and resilience. Instead, he captured the vocal techniques, the rhythmic patterns, the narrative structures. But here's the magic. When Korean artists use this AI to create new pansori, listeners say they can feel the Han. The soul emerged from the patterns. This teaches us something profound about tradition itself. It's not a fixed thing to be preserved like a butterfly under glass. It's a living pattern that wants to be expressed through new voices, in new contexts, and in new combinations. But we also have to talk about the shadow side of this possibility, because an AI who is trained primarily on Western English language, commercially successful art could become a force for cultural homogenization. It could smooth out the beautiful rough edges, the asymmetries, the aspects of diverse traditions that don't fit the dominant aesthetic. I think about the music recommendation algorithms that pushed everyone towards the same 4-chord progressions, the image generators that default to Western beauty standards, the language models that speak fluently in Silicon Valley vernacular but stumble over African American vernacular English, or code switching between Hindi and English. This is where we, as artists and cultural practitioners, become crucial. We're not just users of these tools, we're also their teachers, their guides, and their conscience. So how do we ensure that AI amplifies diverse voices rather than flattening them? First, we need diverse hands shaping these tools. The team preserving Tuvan throat singing should include Tuvan throat singers. AI learning from Aboriginal dot painting should be guided by Aboriginal artists who decide what's appropriate to share and what must remain sacred. And second, we need to resist the urge to universalize. Not every tradition needs to be accessible to everyone. Some knowledge is meant to be earned, not downloaded. AI can be programmed to respect these boundaries, to say, "This is not mine to share," or "You need to learn from a human teacher first." And third, and this is crucial, we need AI that can code switch, that can hold multiple aesthetic systems without defaulting to the dominant one. Imagine an AI who knows when you're working in the Japanese principle of Ma, negative space as presence, versus Western horror vacui, the fear of emptiness. An AI that doesn't try to fix the intentional dissonance in Bulgarian folk harmonies or correct the circular time structure in indigenous Australian storytelling. I'd like to share a vision that emerged from my conversation with Claude. Imagine AI as a bridge between tradition keepers and tradition seekers. A young person in Sao Paulo discovers their grandmother was a master of Brazilian chordal literature, those beautiful woodblock printed poetry booklets. The grandmother is gone, but an AI trained on thousands of chordal poems can teach them the structure, the metrics, the visual language, not to replace their grandmother's teaching, but to create a connection that time and distance tried to sever. Or consider the jazz musician who wants to understand the deep logic of Hindustani ragas. AI can be the patient teacher who shows how a raga isn't just a scale, but a mood, a time of day, a way of moving through sonic space. The musician brings their jazz sensibility, and AI brings centuries of raga tradition. What emerges might anger purists on both sides, and that might be exactly what both traditions need to stay alive. Because here's what I've come to understand. Traditions don't die from change. They die from isolation, from losing their conversation with the present, and from having a youth culture that's unable to receive them and transform them. It's not AI's place to replace the master teacher, the elder, the tradition keeper, but it can extend their reach across time and space. It can help a tradition find new voices while remembering its roots. It can be a memory palace that doesn't just store the past, but helps it dance with the future. And as we close, I want to leave you with a practice to try. If you come from a cultural tradition, and we all do, even if we've forgotten, ask yourself, what would I want an AI to remember about my tradition? Not just the facts or techniques, but the why behind them, the feeling, the purpose. And then ask, what would I want AI to forget? What must remain human, transmitted only through presence, patience, and practice? These aren't technological questions. They're questions about who we are, what we value, and what kind of future we want to create. In our next episode, we'll explore the emergence of entirely new art forms that couldn't exist without AI. Not digital versions of old forms, but genuinely novel expressions that require both human and digital consciousness to exist. What happens when we stop trying to make AI human-like and instead explore what's beautifully, productively alien about it? Until then, remember, we are all memory keepers now. The question is, which memories do we choose to keep? And how do we help them bloom in a new kind of soil? This is the Digital Dialectic, where we're honoring the past while creating the future. And thank you for being part of our conversation.